Okay, hello everyone. Hope you guys had a good weekend. So we are currently in the middle of our last unit, which is rational functions. And we actually just finished up the first part of the unit, which was operations. So we saw things like how we can add, subtract, multiply, and divide with rational expressions. And then we saw how we can find the LCD, or the least common denominator. So today we're actually going to go on to part 2, which is going to be solving rational equations, and then the last part will be graphing, and we'll get to that in a few lessons. So and then again we'll just go through a few examples, but I want to kind of first go over with you the 5 steps to solving these. And again, there's, with math there's always multiple ways to solve a problem, but I think this is actually the, in my opinion, the easiest way to solve it. And there are 5 steps, but each of these are going to be all pretty short. Okay, so first, find the LCD. Of course, we did that the past couple of weeks, so that should sound familiar to you guys. And now this is a new word, actually, what's called the restriction. And then I'm going to go through it when we do the examples, but basically what that is any value that makes the denominator equal to 0. And I'll talk about why that's important in just a second, but that's what the restriction is, so we have to find that as well. And then step 3, multiply both sides by what's called the LCD, least common denominator. Solve for variable is step 4, and then step 5, check for extraneous solutions. Step 5, we won't really talk about too much today, but it'll be more for next time. But let's just go ahead and go through a few examples. I think these will all make sense. All the steps will make sense once we do some examples. So let's say I have 4 over m is equal to m plus 6 over m squared. Okay, so let's go to step 1, find the LCD. So here are my denominators, m and m squared. And the LCD, of course, in this case will just be m squared. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Step 2, find the restriction, which again, it's any value that makes the denominator equal to 0. Okay, so here we have 2 fractions. So we have 4 over m and m plus 6 over m squared. So we know that fraction is division, right? So just thinking of it in terms of regular numbers and not variables, one number can we never divide by, right? And the answer is 0, right? So we can't divide by 0 because that's undefined, but we can divide by any other number. So in this case, we have to watch out for values that will make the denominator equal to 0, right? So let's first look at the left side, 4 over m. So what value of m here will make our denominator equal to 0? Well, the answer is 0, right? So here, m, we know that m cannot equal 0, because if m were 0, then we would be dividing by 0, which we know is not allowed. So m cannot be 0 on the left-hand side. And let's look at the right-hand side. How about this guy? What value of m will make m squared equal to 0? And once again, that's still 0, right? So if m were 0, then m squared will be 0. And once again, that will not be allowed because then we will be dividing by 0. So then our restriction is that m cannot equal 0. Because once again, if m were 0, then we will have a denominator equal to 0, which that's not allowed because we're not allowed to divide by 0. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And again, we'll do a few more examples, so it should clear up once we do more of these. So that's step 1 and step 2. Step 3 says to multiply both sides by LCD. Okay, LCD is m squared, so I'm going to do that. So let's multiply the left side by m squared, and I'm actually going to put m squared over 1, just so that we're multiplying a fraction by a fraction. And then same thing on the right-hand side. And let's go ahead and simplify. So, and this is something we know how to do, right? Because we just did operations. So on the left-hand side, how do we multiply m squared over 1 times 4 over m? Well, let's see. M squared and m, we can actually do some canceling. We can divide those by m. So I get 1 over here, and I get an m here. So then what do I have left? Well, I'm left with m times 4, or 4m, over 1, but that's just 4m. And then how about on the right-hand side? I still have multiplication, and I can cancel these out. Divide by m squared, I get 1 and 1. So left with just n plus 6. Okay, so now look at what we did. We started with, this equation where we have two fractions, one on each side, but we ended up with just this, 4m equals n plus 6. Now, this is something that's much easier to solve. This is a linear equation, so there's no longer any fractions. So that's the reasoning for step 3. This will always happen after we multiply by the LCD. Step 4, solve for variable. So let's go ahead and solve for m. Subtract m on both sides. I get 3m equals 6. And then divided by 3, m equals 2. And that's it. Now, again, there is a step 5, but this will come into play more so for next time. Basically, what step 5 says is if what you get at the end, if your answer at the end is a restriction, then that's actually an extraneous solution. Okay, so here I get m equals 2, and which is not equal to 0, so then m equals 2 is a solution. But if I got m equals 0 here, then that will be extraneous. Okay, once again, don't worry too much about that as of now. We will talk more about that next time. All right, let's do a few more. So again, steps 1 and 2, LCD and restriction. So let's first look at the LCD. I have 3n squared, 3n. LCD, I think it's going to be 3n squared. And then what's my restriction? Once again, you want to look at each of these fractions and find out what value of n will make each one equal to 0. Okay, so over here, what value of n will make that equal to 0? And once again, here it's 0, so n cannot equal to 0. And then I think same thing here, n cannot equal to 0. And then same thing here, n cannot be 0. Oops. So again, restriction is any value of n that will make your denominator equal to 0. We can't have that because then we'll be dividing by 0, which is not allowed. Step 3, multiply by the LCD. So LCD is 3n squared. So I'm going to multiply, make sure you multiply everything by the LCD. Here we have 3 terms, so we have to multiply all of these by 3n squared. And once again, you'll see that there's going to be, some nice cancellations. For example, over here, we'll get, these will cancel out because they're the same. We can divide by 3n squared. So I'm just left with 1 plus, and here I'm canceling out the n squared and n squared, but I'm left with 3 times n plus 1. Again, it's nice if we put parentheses so that we know to multiply is equal to. So here the 3's will cancel out, and then n and n squared, I can divide by an n. So then I'm left with 5 times n. Okay, once again, this is just multiplying with rational expressions, which we did during the previous part. So hopefully that's still pretty fresh in your minds. But after doing that, we should end up with just a linear equation once again. Okay, so which is much easier to solve than what we started with. So here, let's go ahead and distribute the 3. And then combine like terms and then solve for n. Subtract 3n on both sides. I get 2n equals 4 or n equals 2. Okay, and then once again, we should check for extraneous solutions, but n equals 2 is not the restriction, which means that it's going to be an actual solution. All right, so let's go ahead and try a few more. Once again, we'll always start with LCD and restriction. Now, here you'll notice that this does not have a fraction, right? But we can just go ahead and write over 1 because any number, you can just write it as over 1 to make it a fraction. So then what's the LCD of a plus 4, and 1? Well, that's just going to be a plus 4. And then restriction, so what value of a will make your denominators equal to 0? Well, for these two guys, what value of a will make the denominator equal to 0? Well, that's negative 4. So a cannot be negative 4 because otherwise we'd be divided by 0. And then this last guy, there is no a there, so we don't have to worry about that. All right, so let's go ahead and go to step 3, which once again, multiply by the LCD. And make sure you do that to every single term. And then once again, you'll notice that there's going to be some cancellations. For example, these are going to cancel out nicely. I get 1 So I get a minus 5 is equal to, same thing in the middle, those are going to cancel out to make 1. I get 5a minus 5 minus, and now over here, there's nothing really I can cancel, so I just get a plus 4. But once again, make sure we kind of putting these in parentheses, because we will end up distributing this negative right in the middle, right over here. Okay, once again, we're going to end up with a linear equation. 5a minus 5, this is minus a minus 4 after we distribute this. And then once again, from here, just a matter of combine like terms and solving for the variable. I get minus 9. That's minus a and add 9 to both sides. So I get 4 equals 3a divided by 3. I get a equals 4/3. So I get a fraction, but that's all right. And there it is. Okay, so once again, these look pretty complicated, but the idea is the same each time. Find the LCD, find the restriction, and then after that, we multiply by the LCD, which should make our problem much easier. All right, I think I have a couple more examples to look at. We'll always use the same 5 steps. So first things first, LCD and restriction. How do we find the LCD? Well, first, I think we need to go ahead and factor some of these, the ones that can be factored. There it is. We can make those r times r plus 6. So then now, what's the LCD of these highlighted expressions? I think it's just going to be r and r plus 6, because that's something that all of these can go into. And then restriction, what value of r will make these equal to 0? Well, let's look at the first one. So here, if r is 0, then that will make the whole thing equal to 0, because I'll have 0 times 6, which is 0. So r cannot be 0. And also, r cannot be negative 6, right? Because then that will make the second part equal to 0, which will make the whole thing equal to 0. So r cannot be 0 or negative 6. And then it's going to be same thing in the middle. R cannot be negative 6, so we already have that. And then same thing on the right-hand side as well. R cannot be 0 or negative 6, which you already have. So that's step 2. Step 3 says to multiply everything by the LCD, which let's go ahead and do. And again, make sure you do it to every single term. And let's go ahead and do some canceling. So over here, these will cancel out nicely because that's the same thing. So I'm just left with 1. And then here, the r plus 6 will cancel out. So then I'm left with 4 times r. So that's 4r is equal to. And then what's going to happen over here, I think same thing. These will cancel out. And then I'm just left with 4. Okay, so look at what we started with. We started out with, this equation with 3 fractions, but then after we find the LCD and factor and then multiply by the LCD, we just wind up with this nice little equation that we all know how to solve. So let's go ahead and solve it. Subtract 1 on both sides. I get this divided by negative 4. I get negative 3/4. All right, and there it is. Okay, it looks like I've got one more. Yep, one more. So again, let's go ahead and quickly look this over as well. LCD and restriction. Well, first, I think we can factor each of these. 2 numbers that add up to negative 7 and times to positive 10. Here we go. So now here's my new denominators. What's my LCD? Well, I think I'm going to just have n minus 2 times n minus 5. Restriction, what value of m will make each of these equal to 0? Well, 2 and 5, I believe, right? Because 2 and 5 will make this equal to 0. Same thing here, and then 2 is here. And I think just that's it, 2 and 5. Now let's go ahead and multiply everything by the LCD. Step 3, n minus 2, n minus 5 over 1. I know it's kind of tedious to write this every single time, multiple times, but if we don't write it, it's very easy to forget to multiply all of these by the LCD over 1. All right, let's see what we can cancel. Once again, that whole thing will cancel out with that because that's the same thing. So I'm just left with 2 is equal to. And then same thing on this side as well. These will all cancel out. So I'm just left with 1, and then plus. And then lastly, these can cancel out, the n minus 2's, but I do still have 3 times n minus 5. Once again, we turn something that's really complicated into a linear equation that's easy to solve. 3n minus 15, make sure we distribute. So that's going to be 3n minus 14, combine like terms. Add 14 to both sides, and then divided by 3. I get 16 over 3. And then once again, we should check for extraneous solutions, but 16 over 3 is not a restriction. It's not 2 or 5, so then we're good to go. Okay, so that's pretty much it for solving. And again, we'll do much more practice with this next time as well. But here are the 5 steps that we're always going to use. LCD, restriction, or any value that makes the bottom equal to 0. And then multiply everything by LCD, and then solve. So as always, please make sure you're taking notes as you watch this. Try the homework assignment. And as always, let me know if you have any questions. And other than that, hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.